There's a great terror going around talking about how the United States is lost because of the racial demographic changes. One should not get complacent about this, but I know of 3 reasons to have optimism about the long-term future for conservatism and the Republican Party, and by extension, our interests at least somewhat implicitly. At the highest level, we can look at political demographics. Using general social survey data, I was able to figure out the fertility rates of whites of various political persuasions from the year 2000 to 2006. Broken down by political ideology, we can see that white conservatives have the highest fertility rate at 1.96, while white liberals are at 1.39. And when broken down further, the more extreme conservatives are even more fertile, and the even more extreme liberals are even less fertile. But sadly, the US isn't all white, and so white conservatives are in voting wars and breeding wars with other racial groups. And the situation here actually looks manageable, though, with conservative whites being almost at the same level as native-born Hispanics in fertility. In addition, the Hispanic fertility rate has been going down much faster than the non-Hispanic white fertility rate. Since these numbers are from 2015, it's not inconceivable that white conservatives today have a higher fertility rate than native-born Hispanics. From an overall political party standpoint, remember, Hispanics only make up about 15% of the Democrat Party voters. The rest are blacks, Asians, and white liberals, whose fertility is all well below that of conservative and Republican whites. The Democrats depend on mass immigration to remain competitive. Close the border, cut them off, and they'll shrivel up. Here's another thing you might not have heard. The percentage of people who self-identify as white has actually increased from 72.4% in April 2010 to 76.9% in June 2016. I know this is mostly Hispanics who were already here deciding to call themselves white and doesn't represent real racial change, but it's a neat little factoid. The second reason for optimism are net Republican Party gains in party registration in swing states since November of 2016, at least according to Larry Schweikart, in Pennsylvania, Florida, and New Hampshire. Pennsylvania is most important not only in the magnitude of the Republican gains, but also as a possible bellwether for Michigan and to a lesser extent Wisconsin and Minnesota. So expect to see Minnesota be coming close next election and then eventually a Republican state. A third reason for optimism is Generation Z. A poll for high school students in the 2016 presidential election found that 48% of white high school students wanted to vote for Trump, 11% for Hillary, and the rest were irrelevant candidates or were not voting. Obviously, this should be taken with a grain of salt, but through a glass darkly, Gen Z whites look on track to be the most conservative, or at least the most Trumpist generation yet. If these results analogize to adulthood, then Gen Z whites should be block voting almost as heavily as blacks. Given that political views are about 40% a function of genetics, I predicted one day the dam would break. Conservatives have been having more kids for as long as this has been measured, passing on those conservative genes, which are a real thing, making whites more quote-unquote genetically conservative each generation, about 4% more genetically conservative each generation, but held in line by the environmental effects of mass media and the university and schools. But with the rise of the internetwork of computers, the hold of mass media just isn't there. And so the high technology of the internetwork of computers is creating an information environment more similar to the folk politics prior to mass media. And back then, white people held views that today would be called white nationalist. Trump is a piker compared to Teddy Roosevelt. That dam's breaking will unleash whites more genetically predisposed to the right than ever before. A spear of justice through those who wage war on their own kin, and a cleansing fire to usher in a new Europe.